Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about some of the support that set 13 is actually throwing at older archetypes. Now, besides the entire chilled archetype, which we already did a video on just the other day, go check that out if you want to see my thoughts on the chilled archetype. There are many other cards actually, both within the TPs and the main set, that support older archetypes. Today we're gonna go over those main set cards that support older archetypes. I'll probably do the TPs in their own video. I know a lot of people don't really like the TPs, but they really did throw a lot of them at older decks. I feel like people should know about it because there are some pretty good boosts to older strategies within these cards. So guys, with that being said, if you're new here, definitely subscribe, hit that bell so you miss a video. If you guys want to help support the channel, there are many ways down in the description to do so. Particularly today, if you want to buy any of these cards that support these older archetypes, or any Dragon Ball Super cards for that matter, use my link in the description to TCG Player. It does give the channel a bit of a kickback. It really does help out a lot. That being said, let's get started. Alright, first up, we're talking about Son Goku Allies in the Heart. There's a 2-drop 10k deflect battle card. Auto, place one card from light to drop when you play this card from your hand. Play up to one green Krillin with an energy cost of 4 and the blocker skill from your deck or drop area. Then shuffle your deck if you look through it. Okay, so a few things right off the bat here. This is meant to be played with the Goku archetype where Krillins die and then you get to play, I think it's the Final Showdown Goku. And there have been a few waves of support for this strategy. New Krillins have come out, new Gokus have come out, new Namekian Saga cards have come out in general that are meant to kind of be played with this strategy. This one's a little weird, and that whole archetype's weird in general because the Krillins, as far as I'm aware, they all count as 4-drops in all areas as long as your life's 4 or less, and that's always been a weird thing. I kind of wish they made a Krillin at one point that would just do that on the board only when your life, or on the board in the drop area, I guess, depending on where the card needs to read it. But I wish they would just not make that a hand and deck thing, because that's made a lot of support cards really weird for this archetype. But regardless, you crit the life, so ideally you'll want to be at 4 life when you use this skill. Then the auto for 2 greens. When one of your green Krillin cards with an energy cost of 4 is KO'd, play up to 1 mono green Son Goku with an energy cost of 5 from your deck or drop area on top of this card with its skills negated for the turn. Then shuffle your deck if you look through it. So there is a kind of neat combo you can do with this. So you get the Krillin in play, right? The Krillin dies, you use the auto of this card. You can play the 5-drop Goku from, I think it's Draft Box 6. He's an SS3 Goku. You can definitely go back in the database and look at any of the 5-drop green Gokus. There are several of them in the game. And you can also play the Final Showdown Goku when the Krillin dies via its own effect. So for 2 energy, essentially, you're getting out, 10 energy worth of battle cards, some pretty big Gokus that are pretty big beat sticks. Not too bad. In all honesty, though, this card would be a lot better if it had barrier rather than deflect, because yes, while you're going to be, always resolving the effect to play a Krillin with deflect, that's great, but you're not guaranteed to make it to that second auto. So I think this card would have been a lot better if it had barrier versus deflect, but still pretty cool support for those of you guys that like Final Showdown Goku. Then we got Wings supporting the Master's Wish. So we got some Slug support here. 1-drop unique blocker, permanent when activating a rejuvenate skill of one of your green unison cards. If your leader card's a green Slug's army card, your opponent has 7 or more cards in hand, reduce the number of markers removed by that skill by 1. So essentially making your rejuvenate cheaper and more easy to proc. That seems pretty good. Auto this card activates its blocker skill. You and your opponent draw 1 card. Interesting. So the fact that this isn't like a barrier means that the permanent, it's a little bit risky. So I kind of imagine you want to play this card down to the field when you're going to activate the rejuvenate of your unison for Slug. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not much of a Slug player. I haven't really messed around with the archetype too much. Doesn't really appeal all that much to me, but I kind of imagine that's when you're going to want to use it. I don't think you really just want to stick this turn 1 like the other Wings for the deck, actually, because it doesn't have barriers, doesn't really have protection. So again, I think you want to play this when you want to use that rejuvenate skill, and then after you've gotten that payoff from it, sure, activate blocker, you and your opponent both draw a card, you make your way towards milling them out. Seems pretty good for the deck, especially because I think you want to play that really grindy game where you might rejuvenate multiple times. I think that's what Slug seems to want to do, for my opinion at least. Then we've got Bewitching Domination. This is a 1-drop rare that actually looks like an SR just off of all the shininess of the card, but it's a unique Overlord 1-drop. Activate main for a green. If your leader is green, choose one of your green battle cards with energy cost of 3 or less and no keyword skills and gain Servant until the start of your next main phase. Now this card, it doesn't really seem like it's direct Majin Vegeta support. It actually almost seems like it is Overlord support for any green deck. It's kind of weird, to be honest. Like, you already have cards in Majin Vegeta that have Servant, so that wouldn't really work in the case of this card. I guess there are other cards in Majin Vegeta you could turn into Servants, but I wonder if this keeps Servant in the deck. When it gives a battle card Servant, I wonder if it keeps it in the deck for the leader, for the Majin Vegeta leader's effect to play a Servant from the bottom of the deck. I really don't know that ruling. That could be pretty interesting, because that means you can look at other green Vegetas in the game, give them Servant with this Bobbity, and then replay them from the drop. They get the plus 10k power, and then that actually will eventually fall off, so they should be able to restand once that falls off. I can see this being a kind of neat combo enabler. But again, you can actually play this in just about any green deck. He is an Overlord himself, so in any green deck, really, you can play him, turn one of your 3 drops into a Servant, use Overlord, get a draw out of it. Interesting. I think there's a lot of windows for usage of this card. Let me know in the comments below if you actually have an idea with this card that's outside of the Majin Vegeta strategy. Then we got Frieza Demolisher of Planet Vegeta. So we all know this is meant to be played in the King Cold archetype. I did talk about that archetype in a video just the other day, but this actually has another usage, so I'll give it a quick read. It's a 1-drop draw card, auto, pay 2 green, choose 1 extra card with energy cost of 2 or less, that's the key thing here, and the field skill in your battle area, and place it in the owner's drop. When this card's played, choose all your opponent's battle cards and KO them, and this card gets plus 16,000 power and double strike until the end of your opponent's next turn. So the main thing I was thinking about using this with is just about any deck that's playing Frieza Army Healing Pod, but the number 1 deck for that card right now, at least as far as I've seen, is green starter Frieza. Frieza Army Healing Pod has pretty much become a staple of that deck because you play so many cards from the drop area. So playing this in that deck, and it's not a Saiyan, so you're not restricted from playing this card. It is a Frieza card, funny enough. So you play it in that Frieza green structure deck leader, and whenever you're ready to get rid of your field card, you get a board wipe. So yes, you do lose Frieza Army Healing Pod, you do lose a bit of your draw engine, but by the time turn 3, turn 4 rolls around and you're kind of ready to win the game, or you really need to set your opponent back and wipe all their battle cards, I think giving up your Frieza Army Healing Pod is a pretty good trade-off by playing this card and getting the board wipe. And even then, I mean, you're playing 4 copies of Healing Pod. It's not impossible to see another copy and establish it if you really need to keep reborning cards and drawing more cards. So I think this is actually a pretty cool piece of tech in green starter Frieza. Just wanted to throw that out there. Then we've got Spring Time, Labyrinth Unleashed. We haven't really talked about the black cards in terms of their respective archetypes in set 13 yet, but we'll give this card a quick read. It's a 3-drop 5k counter attack. Negate the attack, play this card. Permanent, if you or your opponent have 3 or more cards in their war, produce energy cost of this card in your hand by 2. And then auto, if your leader card's black, when this card is played using its counter attack skill, choose one of your opponent's battle cards, send it to the owner's warp. At the end of the turn, play any cards sent to a warp by this skill to their owner's battle areas, with their skills negated for the turn. So a few interesting things here, right? This is a black negate card. One that's a battle card. We don't really see too many of those. You know, black doesn't really have like Topo-esque cards. They have Bardock the Tenacious, which is a pretty good Nimbus equivalent. But this card, it's not going to be so great against wide boards. Like, yeah, for instance, if you're playing Dark Broly and you're playing against King Piccolo, you can negate with this and then, like, for instance, warp their Tambourine so you don't have to deal with the 40k attacks that turn. That's pretty cool. But in just about any black deck, this gives you a pretty good answer to big boss monsters. For instance, like Victory Strike. We know that in set 13 and even Evo Booster, there's some pretty quick strategies that can drop Victory Strike as early as turn 3 in Evo Booster. And there is potential to drop it turn 2 in set 13, although I don't find it to be that consistent. But I think you can relatively expect turn 3 Victory Strike if your opponent is playing that Victory Strike cheese deck, right? So this gives you an out to Victory Strike by warping it for the turn. Yeah, it's not a permanent solution, but if you're Dark Broly, for instance, once you get back to your turn, you're able to very easily just warp the Victory Strike when it comes back to the field. So pretty good card for older black decks. I do like that it's pretty flexible. I don't love the temporary removal, but there are some situations where it is actually really good. Then we got the power of a Super Saiyan. This pretty much directly buffs Mecha Frieza. We haven't really talked about the yellow cards yet either here on the channel. We will get to all the different colors we haven't touched on yet soon, but this card is, I might as well just say, put this card in Mecha Frieza. This card is so strong in Mecha. Yeah, it's good in just about any yellow deck, but I think Mecha is the premier yellow deck of the format. No one's really arguing that, and this card just makes Mecha infinitely stronger. So as far as older support goes, this is almost a direct boost to Mecha. You can play it, for instance, in yellow Gohan Icarus, right? Like the deck that I built, you guys can play this in that. I'll probably find space to add it into that deck at some point. But besides that, you can play this in Future Gohan, which is coming out in set 13. That's a yellow deck meant for this card to be played in. Just a wish of mine, I wouldn't be upset if this card said, you know, you can only play this if your leader's a yellow Saiyan. It does say power of a Super Saiyan, kind of weird that Mecha can use it, but regardless, I kind of posted on the Facebook group the other day, not really too important, but I think this card's going to make Mecha even more insane than it already is. Then we got Demigram Momentary Ally. This is a black unison. It has auto once per turn, burst 1. If your leader is a black Saiyan only or God only card, when you play a battle card using Overwhelm, this card gains Wormhole for the turn. Then +1 activate main, place up to 2 black battle cards from your warp in your drop area. So I like this a lot for older support. Yes, this is pretty much meant to be played with the new Supreme Kai leader coming out in set 13, but notice it also works for Saiyan only leaders. So the first thing that popped in my head was the SS4 Goku Xeno leader. Like any leader that's a Saiyan only, and thank goodness they didn't allow this card to be played in Vegex, because Vegex is not a Saiyan only leader. But yeah, I think this is really good support for older decks like that. It gains Wormhole, and between the auto and the +1, you put 3 back in the drop. So you're set up for 2 Overwhelms just by playing the Unison. So take a look at some older Saiyan only leaders or some God only leaders that are black. Take a look at those, see what you want to play with. I think this is a really good piece of support. And we do have the activate main -3, add up to 2 battle cards with energy cost of 7 or less, and the Overwhelm skill from your warp to your hand. So you can actually recover an Overwhelm if you really need it from your warp. So overall, guys, those are cards that I found that do support older archetypes pretty well. I do want in the comments below if you've seen any ones that I missed. We will talk about TPs in another video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.